A lot of companies think they have a copy problem, but the reality is they have a messaging problem.
My guest on this episode is Diane Wiredu. She is an amazing B2B marketing, messaging, and copywriting consultant. She runs a company called Lion Words.
I don't see that messaging is just a marketing thing. I really think that messaging problems are leadership problems.
She's helped some of your favorite B2B SaaS brands improve their messaging and improve their copy. And that's what we talk about on this episode, including why maybe all the frameworks and methodologies you don't need, and you need to just focus more on finding your one key message.
To create messaging that resonates with customers, we need to actually go out and speak to customers and understand how they think, how they speak, how they feel.
If you feel like your story is not landing with prospects and customers, or if it could just get better, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Enjoy my conversation here with Diane.
1, 2, 3, 4. Exit.
Yeah, so I'm Diane Wiredu. I am a messaging strategist, conversion copywriter, and the founder of Lion Words, which is a messaging consultancy for B2B tech and SaaS companies. So I help teams essentially create, clear, compelling messaging that resonates with buyers, right? So it's pretty niche, I think, but also the impact is kind of huge. So messaging is all about how can we make the value of your products and your services much easier to understand. So obviously you can, get better results from marketing assets and so on. So the scope of my work is often split into kind of two parts. So one, the messaging piece, messaging strategy. So getting clarity on the core messaging itself, documenting that. So what is the unique value you provide? What are the most important relevant things about your product that we need to highlight? I like to also look at, the context, the story, the point of view that you operate in, because I think that also sets the foundation for strong and effective copy. And then the second piece is like the copywriting. So then how do we translate that messaging into copy for key marketing assets, which primarily the homepage and across the website. So now we know what, how do we say it, right? How do we organize those messages across the page using conversion copywriting principles and so on? So yeah, in many cases, phase one is actually where the engagement ends with companies that I work with. If you have the building blocks and the strategy to run with that, but with some companies, then I come in and help them execute on that as well.
Do you help companies with positioning, or do they have a position and then you execute on the copy? Because there's an important relationship between those two. I'm curious to hear how you navigate that.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So my position on positioning has shifted a bunch over the years. Like if you asked me like a year ago or 2 years ago, I was like, I don't touch positioning. I don't work with companies who don't have their positioning dialed in. Because it's a whole beast in itself. And I'm not a positioning consultant. Like really where my zone of genius and expertise is around the messaging piece and then, translating that into copy. But messaging is this bridge between your positioning in the market, what you do, who for, where you sit, that context setting, getting those messages super clear, and then how do we transform that? And so over the years, it's impossible not to touch the positioning piece. It's impossible because messaging, it's garbage in, garbage out. And so, yes, I have had to kind of adapt my process a little bit. I think that my messaging, that discovery process of just kind of getting under the hood of a business and understanding what they do, who for, and how, there's a part of that is positioning refinement anyway, right? And so I'm trying to make sure that it is as completely dialed in and as locked in as possible. I'm trying to make sure that, who you say your ICP is as absolutely dialed in as it can be. Because if a company comes to me and oh yeah, we sell to Fortune 500 companies, I'm like a red flag, I can't, how can I message to those people? So it's a roundabout way of saying, yes, I touch on it. I love, April Dunford's methodology, is brilliant, right? So I kind of approach those positioning pieces following that, right? So I try to refine those different blocks of, what are the competitive alternatives? Who's the market you win in? And if all of that is refined and clear, then we build on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you might often uncover, you might be working on copy and then you might uncover a bridge to stronger positioning through copy and
100%.
messaging, right?
Yes.
when I first like went out on my own, one of the things I did was positioning and messaging, and I didn't realize how different the two things were. And at first I wanted to just do positioning. I'm good at that exercise. And I found that companies find it valuable and you can charge good money for it, right? Because it's such an impactful thing. Although not enough. I wish the most gangster model would be like if you could do it like the old school copywriters and be like, let me get some, if you really believe in this, let me get some percentage of
Let
sales.
me get, royalties.
But they
Yes.
don't. It's like, oh, we'll
Yeah.
pay you $5,000 to we'll give you $5,000 to like write our website copy. And I'm like, well, hold
Yeah.
on. What if like this new website brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in revenue? They just don't think that way. So, but I found one of the challenges with positioning is, and even I've felt this as a VP of marketing, is you bring in someone in, you do this great positioning, but then it just sits in this doc, and it's like the messaging is the actual execution of it. And I've seen lots of companies where you have good positioning that lives inside of a Google Doc somewhere, but it needs to be on the homepage. You need a killer website. You need to like execute on the copy. And so there's this kind of weird relationship between the two of them that I think often lacks from a delivery standpoint.
What's interesting about what you're saying as well is I actually think that messaging is that bridge that you're kind of talking about here. So like I don't really use the term like homepage messaging, right? Because to me, even within that, there's a little bit of a kind of a contradiction. And so what I think of when I talk about messaging is
Wait.
right.
What is the contradiction? What's the contradiction?
Okay. So when we're looking at a homepage, we're looking at the copy, and often for many people who are assessing what you see on the homepage, like they can't see past the copy, right? There is messaging. Messaging essentially, if I'm going to break this down, because a lot of people like ask me, okay, what's the difference between messaging and copy? Isn't it the same thing? So the way that I break this down is messaging is what you say about your product, your services, right? And then simply put, copy is like how you say that, right? So messaging, we need to really get down to the nitty gritty. It's all about articulating, the value, the uniqueness of your product in a clear, relevant, differentiated way. What are the messages? What are the interesting things that we need to bring to the forefront? How can we articulate what you do and why that matters and who for in a clear way, right? And so those are the kind of those key messaging blocks. And there are so many different ways that we can shape your messaging. And then that's what most people see when we're looking and we're going in and we're analyzing headlines, we're analyzing, benefit messages and product and kind of the structure. But I think, honestly, that a lot of companies think they have a copy problem, but the reality is they have a messaging problem. And so many companies are coming in, looking at the homepage and like, oh, tweaking, we want to tweak this and optimize and change wording, and realize that actually you need to take a step back and figure out like, what is it that we're saying and why? And part of that prioritization, refining that's how I kind of approach messaging. So I don't think that's controversial. I just think that sometimes it's worth kind of clarifying that.
Yeah, and I also think it like somebody bringing in someone like you into a company, I think is perfect example of like when you should turn to outside help. Like we I often have, basically there's kind of two guests that I have on the show. There's either like CMOs and marketing leaders, and we talk about running a marketing team, and then I bring on subject matter experts like you to talk about copy and messaging, or maybe there's an SEO person, or maybe a product marketing person. And I think one of the mistakes I've made in trying to like, oh, someone on the team can do this because you paid for them and you want to have them do it. But I do think that especially with things like messaging and copy, you want to hire someone who this is all they do, right? You have 50 companies that you've worked with, and you can pull from all those lessons, and you have a way, and you have your framework. You might have a great writer on the team, but it might make more sense to bring in an outside person. We're thinking about how I really want to grow traffic to our website this year, and I want to do it through SEO. And we could certainly do that through the team, but I also think like bringing in someone who's helped grow, dozens of websites, multiple growth, levers of growth and traffic, they're going to have that level of expertise. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like
Yeah,
there are areas where
definitely.
you
I
want to
mean,
hire that specialist, and I think you're an example of that.
yeah, definitely. I think it is. I think it is a kind of unfair advantage when you just do one particular thing over and over again, and getting to see so many different businesses and how they approach it. And I also think that's one of the reasons that messaging is so hard, right? It's one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to kind of sit here and talk about best practices and how to optimize it, or why messaging sucks, X, Y, Z. But there is the reality that the reason that founders and marketers and product marketers find this so hard is because it is tough. Like you're building, B2B, you have a product or a service that is solving a real valuable product problem for an audience, and you have so many things that you want to say, and there are so many ways to approach it. And also, you're so close to the product or the service itself, right? It's like the inside the jar syndrome, right? So when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label. I don't know who first said that. I heard it years ago, and like I've kind of stuck by that since. And so bringing someone in that just has that kind of outside perspective and kind of can see things clearly and can also challenge you on like, okay, why are we saying this? Like, where has this come from? Are there assumptions that we're kind of making and bringing to the forefront? Are we getting caught up in following competitors or like phantom competitors? I think April Dunford talks about phantom competitors in positioning. Are we actually trying to compete with something that we're not really competing with? Like, what do we need to lead with? So yeah, having that outside set of eyes to come in definitely helps. And I know that I've had a lot of feedback from companies that one of the things that they've enjoyed about the process isn't just doing it, but also the pushback and the challenge. So I can get a bit challenging at times and kind of push back on, okay, why? So what's going on? But yeah, it's necessary sometimes to get down to clear messaging and just to kind of remove all of the fluff as well, right? Like you have to unpack. It's like peeling an onion.
I think the exercise of having someone who doesn't work inside of your company and you saying, so what, is really powerful. I think it's when you're inside the company, it's a little bit easy. You get more defensive about it. And when you have someone outside saying like, hold on, I don't actually know what this means. Well, you're not our ideal customer. Well, no, hold on. Let's keep going on this. Like, what does this actually mean? And then it's also harder today. It's hard today because everyone has already said the thing. It's much harder to be unique and be the only one today, which is typically like great marketing is about owning your facts. What great facts do you have? And oftentimes the facts can't just get made up from marketing. They need to be driven by the product, the roadmap, your customer. And it's harder than ever to find unique things. Then you also have companies who are saying the same thing, but they might not do it. I've talked to founders before and it's like, yeah, 5 companies in our space say they do it, but we're the only ones who really do it that way. It's like, okay, well then how can we explain that?
Exactly. How do you message that? This reminds me of like this idea of just kind of sprinkling on differentiation. Like I feel like a lot of copywriters and messaging strategists get called in to just kind of like, can you just make us sound a bit different? Can you just like sprinkle this on? And it's like differentiation is not something that you can, sprinkle on. And it, like you said, it's harder with more products, more messages, more saturation in the market to actually cut through that noise. And also it's hard, particularly within B2B, like tech products. Okay, we can look at your actual software, but B2B services and agencies, like differentiation is like a hard concept, right? Because often it sits at that intersection between your process, like the way that you work, your team, right? So your credibility, the expertise that you have, but as well as the actual product and services that you deliver. And so sometimes I think that one of the challenges that companies have when it comes to their messaging is that they're trying to find this, like, the USP. Like, I don't know if the USP exists anymore. I don't think as a concept it's a valid thing to search for, because usually it's like this amalgamation of these different things and how we express that.
So USP is unique selling proposition?
Unique selling point, yeah.
A unique selling point. And you don't think companies can have one anymore?
It's not that I don't think that it's possible at all. I just think that the concept itself is probably a bit outdated. And for many B2B companies, particularly B2B tech and SaaS, I think it's a bit of an outdated and almost like damaging concept to look for this one particular selling point.
Yeah.
As if there is like this golden ticket, the golden snitch, like feature or aspect of our product that is going to sell it. I think that we do need to look for a key message, right? Key messages, yes. But that one particular selling point, I think that what our differentiation actually is, particularly in B2B, is usually that intersection between various elements, right? And kind of finding that. And also focusing more on the actual problem that you solve, right? So more the kind of lens of a value proposition. So I lean much more into value proposition frameworks instead of like selling points, because a value proposition, we can focus much more on the actual user, the client, the buyer, and how we solve a problem for them in a particular way.
Can we double click into that and just explain like how would you articulate the difference between like a value proposition, a
Mm-hmm.
proposition of value, and a selling proposition?
Yeah. So let's go into how I approach a value prop, because I don't know if I have a good definition for a unique selling point, right? We might need to we might need to pull one up and contrast it. But to me, a
I just
value
mean, what are
proposition,
you trying to get at? What are you trying to get at by saying like lead with value? Because value is not going to be. I get what you're saying. It's not going to be. And one of the things that I have struggled with in the past with marketing B2B products is you talk to the founders or one person in the company, they're like, this is, we have this feature and this is what makes us different. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, but they're not just buying that one feature. There's hundreds of other things. So is it something
exactly.
around like telling the broader story about who you're for, why
Yeah.
you exist, and the overall value of using your product? You almost want to like elevate the discussion instead of making it about a particular feature. You want to have a 1+1=3 kind of story about why your product is the right one for them.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely see kind of value proposition as a key element of messaging. And in its simplest form, if we break it down, a value proposition to me is just a promise of value that you make, right? And so I found that the most compelling value propositions kind of touch on the fact that customers are trying to do something a certain way. There's a pain or a struggle around that, and then your product kind of offers that transformation. And so, for me, what I'm trying to do when I create value propositions for clients is how can we distill that into something that is concise, specific, a statement that is valuable and desirable about your solution or your offer, right? So, a strong value proposition to me is going to answer how does your product or service solve a real issue or real pain that your ideal customers are having. So, for me, particularly at Linewares, the way that I kind of break it down is I start by looking at the old way, right? So how are they doing things before? What's the problem with that way? Why was that not working? And then connecting that to something that your customers or your buyers can actually do right now, thanks to some aspect, some attribute, or some feature of your product, and then the impact that that has, or the gain that they can gain from that, right? So, kind of breaking down those elements to me actually is an easier way to almost kind of codify um, actually what the key value that you deliver. And then the really important part of it that we kind of like skipped across is like, okay, but value according to who, right? Because like value according to us, like we don't get to decide what the value is from our product. And so I approach messaging, and my messaging process is very much customer focused and customer informed. To me, it only stands to reason that to create messaging that resonates with customers, we need to actually go out and speak to customers and understand how they think, how they speak, how they feel about not only our products but also the kind of whole ecosystem and that kind of decision making process. And so all of this can't be done like in isolation as well. It also has to be informed by what value are they gaining, and like actually performing voice of customer research and competitor research as well.
You mentioned the customer's words. One of the things we do this at Exit 5, I've done this at past companies before, where we're very active on social media. We get lots of email comments and replies, and I think probably even if you're not in an industry where that's possible, you can still get this. But the best for all of the time that I can go spent alone in the woods walking, trying to figure out like some witty way to say something from a copy standpoint, you'll get an email from a customer who's explaining your product in their words. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing way to say it. And we
Yeah.
screenshot it and we have a Slack channel. And I push everybody on our team who writes copy, whether it's like Matt, who's doing it for the community, Danielle, who's doing it for the website, to keep a swipe file of things people say about Exit 5, because I found that that's the best building block to go and write copy. So instead of just in your own head and trying to think about those words, all of a sudden someone describes Exit 5 in their words, not trying to be a marketer, but just literally how they would explain it to someone else. And I'm like, man, we didn't think of this. This is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And I love having like a Notion file or a Google Doc or something where I can scroll through and just look at the ways people are talking about our product.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you do anything
This
like
is
that?
exactly. So what you're talking about there is what Joanna Weber, who's like founder of Copy Hacker, she calls
Sure.
sticky copy. And I've always loved that term because I call it like interesting or memorable copy, but I think sticky is the best. And yeah, I always like as part of that voice of customer research process, I always have like a tab of just messages word for word that have stood out, that are memorable, that kind of make you sit up and jolt and think about something in a different way. And I think you're highlighting something that's really important because I know that, you know, marketers are not new to customer research, right? Everybody out there is saying, talk to your customers, use the customer's words. Every single copywriter is like, employing this tactic. But I think it's not just using your customers' words, it's also finding interesting ways, unusual and unique angles to speak about your product. So within my kind of messaging process, the first part of that voice of customer piece is just looking for key information and having a real conversation, looking for pains and problems, looking for objections, hesitations, anxieties. So like I start by prioritizing and theming and grouping those messages so that helps me kind of map out what's important, what's not, what's coming up, right?
Nice.
But then beyond that, once you've got that data and said, okay, maybe we need to lean into this message more than the other because it's come up so much, then the question becomes, how can we express that in a different way? Like one example that I often see working with B2B software is prospects will often parrot back jargon and vague buzzwords because they've seen it. So they'll say, oh, we want an out of the box solution. And so you'll get on 10 like customer calls and everyone will say we need an out of the box solution. So if you just take out the most repeated message and put that on your website, you can still end up sounding like everybody else because as humans we are also parrots. So looking and listening out, like what you said, for unusual things is key. Like looking beyond that surface level stuff, because just listening to your customers and just using the words of your customers isn't enough to actually differentiate your copy and your messaging.
Nice. That's well said. I like that. You talked about something that in there that I think is such an important ingredient of messaging, copywriting, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to build on that. It's like this idea of organizing the story a little bit, organizing the ingredients. You mentioned bucketing the ingredients. Like,
Yeah.
I have a founder friend that I help on, in my free time with marketing and storytelling, and he's amazing product, really compelling product story. But he's an engineer, right? And it's just like fact, thing. And I'm like, let me take a stab at this. I always kind of like rely on the rule of threes. I initially picked this up from, there's a great book called The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs by this guy called Carmine Gallo. And Steve Jobs was amazing at, I think, the best marketing storyteller, just for his ability to simplify things. And if you ever need inspiration, just go to YouTube, go watch like the iPhone keynote. His ability to take big things and simplify them down. The first iPod was 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? Things like that. Anyway, he talks about how his presentations were often organized in groups of three. And so I feel like this is true in B2B a lot. It's like, we got so many things to say. I like simplifying. And for some reason, humans are wired to remember groups of three. Like, here you have an emergency, you dial 911. If you got lit on fire, it's stop, drop, and roll, right? It is,
Right.
There's three parts of a story. There's 1, 2, 3. Hey, I got 3 things I want to talk about. Boom, boom, boom. And so I like to just have like simple frameworks like that for like, it's overwhelming to try to boil down this story. I kind of want to organize this into 3 sections. And actually what I'm hearing with your product story is there's kind of 3 sections. There's this first part, which is kind of like the data. Then there's this part, which is kind of like the engine. And then there's this part, which is like the AI, Copilot or whatever. And okay,
Right.
now we have these 3 sections. Now we can work from there. Do you ever feel like, I see you smiling, but I often think about the saying that kind of great writing is also great editing. It's really just an active editing. And I do think a lot of this is like, let's organize this, let's organize the parts. And then from there we can whittle and make the copy sharper.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason I'm smiling and almost laughing is because like there's a point in that I kind of want to like what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of contradict you.
I would hope so. It's about time somebody pushed back on this damn podcast.
Okay, no, because there's a couple of different. There's so many avenues. I'm trying to also wrangle your thoughts here, Dave, because you do like you throw out a lot of thoughts. So I'm trying to decide which avenue I want to take with this, because it's so interesting. Like storytelling is so vast and immense, and there's so many things that we can touch on with that. So I kind of want to come back to the idea of structure and flow and hierarchy, because I think that's really key. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough when it comes to B2B messaging and copywriting. So we'll like put that on ice. But I want to pick up first on what you said about like the power of 3 and the rule of 3, because I
made a note. We'll come back to the other
Okay,
part.
awesome, great, because I forget things like in one ear and out in the other. So I have a bit of a bugbear with like the power of 3, right? So I'm not going against every single storytelling great. So like, I'm a linguist by heart, and I've studied English and linguistics, and it's irrefutable that the power of 3 works in terms of storytelling. But here's where the problem comes in. The problem comes in is where founders, marketers now apply the power of 3 to headlines, value props, and think that we need to say 3 messages. And it's the reason that we end up with really fluffy, horrible like headlines that make me itch, that are just like automate, optimize,
or maybe
intelligence. Right.
Or like sometimes maybe two of the things are really good and the third one is there just to be the third one.
Right. So what I want to do, because I just want to make sure that no one comes away thinking Diane said use the power of 3, and then they go and put the power of 3 on their website.
No, that was me who said that. That was me who said that. Let's be clear.
Yeah. But this definitely applies for like overarching big storytelling stuff. But if we bring this now to like a practical level, headline, value prop, this stuff, where companies really need to focus on is like prioritizing further, right? If I land on a website and in the value proposition, you're telling me that you do X, Y, and Z, when I click off that, which message am I going to remember, right? What am I actually going to go away and associate with you and your product and your company? And so I do think occasionally when it comes to B2B products and services, we kind of use this like structure of 3 as a little bit of a cop-out. And my approach, particularly on like the sentence level with messaging, is making sure that each sentence contains one message. I think right now there is a bit of a pandemic of just overstuffing messaging. It's like with products in tech, we see, product bloat. And I think that we also have kind of messaging bloat, where there are just so many messages, and it's really hard for customers and prospects to kind of know what you're talking about when you're kind of saying, we do this, this, and this, and we do this, and we're, we are the fastest, most efficient, safest product on the market. Cool. Put a stake in the ground and tell me which one of those you are so that I can go away and have that in mind as a point of reference. So yeah, I know that's
I like
slightly
that. So,
different.
No, it's good. So instead of having kind of like 3 things that are all 33%, 33%, 33%, here's our story, maybe it pays more to own one of those messages, and that is the thing. We are the safest car. Like we are the safest car on the road or something like that. Like you can own one stronger, be stronger with it and own one of them.
100%. I mean, it's one of the hardest parts of the messaging work that I do with companies is really getting cutthroat and being disciplined and cutting messages and prioritizing. The more we say, the more we put the onus on prospects to actually kind of figure out what we're all about and what we're best at. And so one of the kind of exercises that I like to do with companies, just a really simple one, is just asking the question, if prospects, customers were to walk away having remembered one thing, what would it be? And that's often like an interesting question, just like the start of engagement or throughout an engagement, to just kind of bring us back and remember, okay, well, what's what's the message here? And so maybe we can come back to kind of like hierarchy, but when we're thinking about messaging elements or on a homepage, right? Each actual section or each part or element really needs to kind of hone in on one key message. And so, yeah, my kind of advice would be beware of the power of three when it comes to like website copywriting, right? Big picture storytelling, power of three always, right? Every time I do a conference presentation, I do a talk, like I do a keynote, you will be damn sure that I'm going to have 3 acts. Like there is always going to be 3 acts in my presentation, right? But when it comes to like a value proposition, we need to kind of dial that down to one thing.
Yeah, that's nice. I really like that. I wrote it down because it's just I take notes during this. But I like if prospects had to remember one thing about your product, what would it be?
It's a tough question.
Like think about that. For every one of you that's listening right now, you're on the treadmill, you're pulling weeds in the garden, you're cleaning the dishes, you're doing the dishes, you're just walking around the house. Think about that. For all the messaging frameworks and positioning frameworks and this and that, like what is the one thing that a prospect could remember about your product?
Yeah, what's that? I call it the OKM. What's your one key message? What's that North Star? And obviously, we're not only going to say one thing, but it's just good to have this, this kind of gravitational pull towards something and have a stake in the ground around something.
One key message. I like that. OKM. And because that's a question that to me that's not just solved by the marketer or the writer.
Not at all, right? It's a much bigger thing. But I mean, personally, I don't see that messaging is just a marketing thing. I really think that messaging problems are leadership problems as well. It's why any engagement that I do with a B2B startup or scale up involves the founder, CEO. I don't work with a company if the founder or CEO won't be involved, and I work with the C-suite leadership. So we get head of sales involved, we get customer success, we get all of those key people because creating messaging in like this isolation and then going and telling everyone, hey, this is what we created. Like you need internal alignment, you need internal consistency, and you need it championed beyond just product marketing, right? I do think that when we're talking about company or product messaging, a lot of companies, like they have one product anyway, if we're not talking about a suite. We need clarity across the board and we need everyone to be talking from the same hymn sheet.
I think too often the marketer or the writer, whoever's just thrown like the problem of differentiation or answering that question, what's the key message? And then what happens is you might pick one, but then like this VP that doesn't align with her interests. And so she wants it to be something else. And then this person and then the product leader is like, well, that's not even really on the roadmap. We're actually kind of investing majorly in this other area. And so that doesn't feel good because how does our main message on the homepage, it's not actually where we're going anymore. That's old.
Yeah.
It's just so much nonsense and conflict.
Yeah,
and
it's so much bigger than that. And if you don't have, sorry, I just cut you off then. I didn't mean to.
What you should be. This is why you're here, lady. This is what I need more of. I've had some guests recently. I had somebody that pitched me to come on the show, and then I had them come on the show, and the interview was like, yes, Dave, next question. I'm like, wait, you asked to come on here. So This is great. This is what I want.
So what was I doing when I was cutting you off then? Let me get back in the zone. So, messaging is often as well, it's the embodiment and reflection of a type of a strategy, right? So like what is the strategy for the project, for the product, sorry. And so sometimes, the reason that marketers struggle to prioritize and refine is also because they're getting conflicting messages about like, what is the strategy for this product anyway? And I'm not trying to say like this high level, like fluffy vision for the company and our mission. I'm talking about like the actual product, right? And sometimes, if the go-to-market or the product team isn't even aligned on what this thing is, then of course it's going to be hard to message it, like no doubt.
Yesterday, you wrote this headline formula for this headline, which is great. This headline formula has B2B and SaaS startups in chokehold right now. The category for audience. I get the appeal. It's clean, simple, clear, and sometimes when you're truly serving a specific underserved audience in a well-defined category, it hits the mark perfectly. But most B2B tech products don't neatly fit into this rigid box. Can you expand on this? Why do people use this formula? Why do you hate it? What are the challenges with it? And then like what works instead?
Yeah, it's just driving me a little bit crazy. And I think I'm it's a bit harsh because I'm picking a little bit of a fight with like it's like the early stage, right? I think that so many companies have seen like, we are the all-in-one platform for this audience, or we are the, the CRM for this type of, for whatever ICP. And then they come along and think that they need to do the same thing. Like right now, I'm working with a founder who is building a really cool product, but it like spans across like supply chain, inventory tracking, demand planning. And at the start of the project, he has tried to use this formula, right? And it, people fall into this trap. So it's like, oh, it's this big operating system for like consumer brands. But the problem with that is using this, because this is essentially like it's a positioning angle, and then you're kind of trying to fit the copy in it, right? It can work if you are serving a really, really specific subset of the market and you have a really clearly defined category. Then I'm thinking of an example like Focus is a CRM. I actually can't remember the message. There's another company like the less annoying CRM, right? That's great. They know that's good positioning. You are a CRM, got it. And you're telling me that I'm not gonna. It's for the people who can't handle the complexity of like the HubSpots and the Salesforce and XYZ. But when you're actually solving a problem for various profiles, you probably are competing with various different alternatives, not necessarily category competitors. Most SaaS tech products are actually competing with other processes and other workflows and workarounds and hiring something and doing nothing. And so then this framework itself isn't the best way to actually express and put across the positioning and the value of your product. And so what this comment was and what this post was just like, take a step back and don't try to follow formulas from other websites and other companies that it works for. Don't try and fit, your positioning that actually is over here, using my hands too much for a podcast. Sorry, guys. Into...
Oh, it's video. We're good. We got them all.
All
This is
right.
video.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Don't try and fit. It's like squishing. It's like squishing like an octopus in like a Tupperware. Like probably that's a terrible analogy because they would fit. But anyway, let me get back to the point. Like it doesn't work. So there are lots of different approaches that work better. And it comes down to what is the best angle or what is the best hook for your positioning. And for a lot of companies, leaning in and calling out a pain point or a problem is a much better way to actually position the value of your product, right? So contextualizing the value of your product based on the problem that all of your customers have and how you solve it is better, particularly like in the case of the fund that I'm working with, where the problem spans across lots of different users, so like ops users, demand planning, XYZ, but the problem and the pain is the same. Or like we've touched on value proposition. So actually leading with the value, like the specific thing that your product allows customers to do, that makes more sense. Or using, disruption, like calling out the status quo, the old way of doing things and showing a better way forward. Even this is a better option. So yeah, it's a bit of a rant, but just, to take a kind of a step back of using formulas, because it's just, I see too many companies just falling in the trap of just following this stuff blindly, and then the value of what they actually do is buried.
What's the next step after that? Like what would be a way to try to tackle that at your company? Like you just listen to this and you're like, man, she's saying a lot of things that I think like we're not good at our company. What would be the next step?
Step one is like document and evaluate where you're at. So it's not a sexy name, right, for this step, but just document, evaluate your existing messaging, your existing beliefs, right? The reason is because we need to have a benchmark, right? We need to have a point of departure. Usually with messaging, we don't need to scrap it out and like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like you're doing something right. Your messaging got you here. It's just that we need to like maybe shift it going forward. And so at this step, what I want to try and do, or what I do, you can do this yourself, is just what's working, what's not, what are the gaps. is everyone telling a different story? What are they saying? What are the points of friction? What are the opportunities? What should we be saying, right? And so I do that personally through evaluative questions, send a questionnaire to different stakeholders. We get on a call, we kind of go through all of this stuff, but someone internally can lead that, right? You don't need someone external to do that. So start by doing that. The next two steps is we've looked inward. Now we need to look outward, right? So research and discovery. So first, find out what customers are saying, right? Voice of customer research. I've touched on this. I'm not going to go crazy into it, but if we're going to create messaging that resonates with customers, you need to know what your customers are thinking and saying and how they feel about your product. Hopefully, businesses have a decent feedback loop there. If you don't, build one in, make sure that all the different teams are talking to each other, and make sure this is a big part of your process, because it makes life so much easier. Like you said, Dave, that you guys have a swipe file and you reach out and you know what people are saying. This is a huge help. The second part of that is find out what competitors are saying. So I do a competitor messaging audit with every company and product that I work on. And the key here is we're not looking at what competitors are saying to copy, right? We're not trying to follow. We want to do the opposite. We want to understand what are the opportunities. We want to avoid that Me Too messaging. Where is the white space that we can go and fill? Because our messaging doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Now, I talked earlier about making sure that we're not dealing with like phantom competitors, but also analyze like the right competitors, right? But look at that, look at what people are saying, what are they leading with, what's working, what's not, so that you have kind of a point of reference. And then 4 and 5 is then, now we've done that, like synthesize, right? So filter through those findings and narrow that messaging focus. So this is kind of that hard bit where you've spoken to customers, you've done all this analysis, you've spoken internally, but like now you need to go through. I don't use like AI for this stuff. I do this manually. Like I go through call transcripts with like a highlighter and like an Excel sheets, and I highlight and bold words, and I look for priorities. I look for themes. I look for opportunities, and I map that all out, and I feed that back to the team. And I'm like, this is what we're seeing. This is what I'm seeing. These are the priorities. This is the stuff that we need to be leading to. These are the interesting things that are coming up. And then based on this, we need to narrow down and we need to lean into some of these key messages. Or sometimes it's going to highlight, yeah, we're on the right track. We're doing the right thing. We just need to shift that angle. And then step 5 is like, put those pieces together, right? So lay the messaging blocks and actually document that. A lot of companies would just benefit from actually having this stuff documented and a kind of source of truth as they grow and as they scale and as they hire copywriters and bring on other people. And make sure that it is something useful and actionable, right? But having that simple messaging playbook, a messaging hub, like a one-pager, right, where the key messages exist and everyone can refer to it and optimize that, that kind of lays the groundwork for what comes next, which is, okay, how do we implement that on the website and so on. So wasn't super simple, but it's not crazy hard. It's not crazy complex.
All right, let's wrap up with this. You mentioned AI briefly. What role do you see AI playing in the future of messaging, copy, websites? You're living this world right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to lead you in a certain direction. I just kind of want to let it breathe and hear your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm bullish on AI. I'm using AI. I'm playing around with it in a lot of my processes. I don't know. I don't really think that I'm the right person to say what role I see it playing.
Let me ask you a different question. Are you why wouldn't AI replace Diane in like 2 years from now?
Yeah, great question. AI is not something to use to think, right? AI is something that we want to put data in, help aggregate, pull things out, look for themes, maybe look for patterns, look for angles. The way that I'm using it and the way that I think that, companies should be using it is by inputting all of that differentiation, that key positioning that you figured out by actually speaking to your market, and then using it to help you shape copy and messaging and kind of be faster and efficient going forward. But my question often to companies are like, okay, can't we just put in some prompts and like figure out our positioning in the market and like our whole strategy. And, you know, there are people selling like prompts and templates to figure out your messaging. Why would you think that a data set of like existing messaging out there is going to help you draw out what makes you different? Right? Like it just doesn't make sense. And so what we need to do is like do the thinking, maybe use it to help you challenge your thinking, right? But I think it needs to be a tool, right? It's not something that's actually going to help us like create something, you know, messaging that's clear, relevant, differentiated. It has to come from you as a company and also from your customers.
I feel like so often that idea comes from you're out on a walk, you're in the middle of a CrossFit workout. You're, oh, I got it, I got the angle. Like it's not
Right?
like a response back from some prompt. It's like very nuanced take. But I do think that like where AI can play a role is like, here are our 5 closest competitors. Here are all the call notes. Here are their websites. What are the patterns? Like, what can you kind of summarize like the patterns of how these companies go to market? And maybe we can identify what possible opportunities for us to pursue could be, and then from there we can work on the messaging from there.
Yeah. I've tried to do that and I've tested out stuff like this, and it's taken me like to build the prompts, it's taken me so much longer. And then in the end, I scrap it and I just do the thinking and come up with something better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like even writing and editing stuff, like it takes me longer to prompt than it would to just even write the thing. So I don't know.
That's, I mean, right. You've been doing it for a long time. It's like people say to me, like, how can you, Dan, I would try to coach people on like writing emails, and Dan will give me a hard time because he's like, dude, not everyone has, this is what you do and you've done it for 15 years. Like you can't expect another person to just like in 5 minutes, like the email that might take you 5 minutes to write might take someone 2 hours to write, because there's, you know, that is what someone is getting out of value from you and your track record and your experience in working with other companies.
Yeah.
So.
I think the basic stuff, like, you know, for sure, if you just want to regurgitate facts, comms, internal stuff, great. But I also do think that there is power in putting in the reps. There is power, and there's power in sitting and not knowing what to say and having to think this through and using your like synapses and getting them to talk to each other and like figure shit out. But I'm, you know, having said all this, like I'm bullish on AI, and I think it's brilliant. I'm working with a lot of companies that are building AI into their products and their tools, and I use it on a daily basis. But I'm not going to outsource the thinking and the strategy, which is something so crucial and the biggest growth lever for a company. I'm not going to outsource that bit.
Yeah, I love it. All right, this was a great conversation. Go to
fun.
Line. You can go find Diane, lionwords.com. But my favorite source of feedback is go to LinkedIn. Follow her, send her a message, and then in a couple weeks, she'll DM me and be like, yeah, people listen to the episode, is awesome. And I sent her a message and say, congrats on your new bench press PR this morning. That's why she's in a great mood and brought the heat today. So Diane, great to see you.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging out with
Thanks
us.
for having me. This was really
nice
fun.
chat
I appreciate
about
you inviting me
messaging and copy. And I'll see you again soon.